Dance lecture to my military.
Troy Anhalt, Jim Bloomberg, and Grant Olsen.
Cover much of that because that is my recollection of things. Of course, is much more intimate and small. However, I'd like to cover something of the international situation. After the First World War after we won it, and went into the background of the Prussian High Command, a story came out that in the German army named von Schlieffen, and he had a very beautiful wife who was a red-haired woman, and she died, and he never remarried, but instead he threw all of his energy into the study of the martial arts. And the one book that was used by the High Command, the Prussian High Command, was called the Battle of Cannae. Well, the Battle of Cannae was one in which Hannibal defeated the Roman army with a rather unusual bit of tactics. He had a smaller army than the Romans, but he killed, it was the biggest slaughter, I think, in history. And the tactics they used was, as I say, called the Battle of Cannae. And this von Schlieffen studied all the battles that he could possibly find information on, and decided that the Battle of Cannae was the most perfect bit of tactics that was ever used. And so this book not only had the Battle of Cannae, but a great many others. And on the basis of the tactics that was used by Hannibal in the Battle of Cannae, von Schlieffen became head of the Prussian High Command, and it was a thought by the Germans that eventually they would have to fight France, and so they got von Schlieffen made the tactics that they would use. Von Schlieffen died just before the First World War started, but his plan was used, but it was not followed through entirely, which I shall explain. In the Battle of Cannae, the main tactics were to show weakness and entice the opposing the army to attack there and then to enclose them. Well, the plan that von Schlieffen had for the eventual attack of France was to have the main attack go down the west coast of Europe, down through Belgium and Luxembourg and so forth, and envelop France and show on the left flank, show weakness to entice the French to attack there, because the French tactics, as they thought, was toujours l'attaque, always attack. And where the German army would show weakness, they would entice the French to attack there. So the plan was to go down the west coast of France with this tremendous battle group and show weakness on the left flank and lure the French to attack there. Well, they started out to do this. But on the left flank, where they showed weakness and called for the French to attack, the Germans called for help. And so, if von Schlieffen had lived, he was a martinet. He probably wouldn't have done what they did. They took 3 army corps out and put them over to stop the French on the left flank. That took 3 army corps out of this tremendous attack that was to come down the west coast of France. Then the then Russia, of course, in the backyard, began to make attempt to do some fighting. They were not in very good shape. And the Germans back there asked for help. And so they took, von Moltkes were in command of the Germans at that time. They took 3 Army Corps and went back and met the Russians. And then when they came down on this sweep that they were coming down the west coast, in Belgium, Brussels and Liège gave a lot more opposition than they anticipated, and they left 3 Army Corps around them and continued their attack. Well, by this time, after they had gone considerable distance, the French finally realized what was happening. And you all have heard perhaps of the Battle of the Taxi Cabs. So they took every possible means of transportation to take their army over and meet the Germans who were coming down the west coast of France. Now there are those who think that perhaps if von Schlieffen had lived, this tremendous army coming down the west coast of Europe would not have been depleted by taking these 3 Army Corps, 3 different ones, out. And they probably would have, the war would have ended in about 6 months. They would have completely come around and captured Paris. But the taxicab army stopped, and the first Battle of the Marne occurred there and stopped them. And so from then on, the front consisted of trench warfare. It wasn't the tremendous movement of troops the way they had right at the start. Now, of course, remember this all had started in 1914. In the United States, we were twiddling our thumbs over here, and one of the popular songs was, "I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier." And we were loath to get into it. And it wasn't until the Germans ruthlessly sank some of our shipping that the spirit got up enough, or